Sergeant Cole Ramirez had her slammed against a concrete wall in front of his entire watch floor before he learned she was the Admiral who commanded the very system he swore to protect, and the mistake would ripple through his career, his reputation, and the culture of the entire facility long after that night shift ended. The rain hammered against the reinforced windows of the Navy's Signals Intelligence Hub in Norfolk, turning the glass into a trembling gray sheet, while inside the low blue glow of monitoring screens painted the room in cold light. Rows of enlisted cyber specialists hunched over terminals tracking live encrypted data feeds tied to an active carrier strike group somewhere far out in the Atlantic, the air humming with server noise and quiet focus, the kind of disciplined silence that exists when everyone knows real ships, real sailors, and real missions depend on what happens on those screens. And into that controlled environment walked a woman no one recognized, dressed in plain Navy utilities with no rank tabs on her collar, no name tape on her chest, no insignia on her sleeves, carrying only a slim tablet, and the kind of stillness that didn't ask permission to exist, and she didn't speak to anyone or check in at the watch desk, or even look around like a visitor would. She simply stepped up near the primary tactical data wall and began studying the scrolling telemetry as if she had every right in the world to be there, her posture relaxed, her expression neutral, her eyes calmly moving across encrypted traffic patterns that most people in the room barely understood beyond the procedures drilled into them. And at first nobody said anything because the night shift had a rhythm and people assumed someone else had cleared her. But Sergeant Ramirez noticed, because Ramirez noticed everything. He was the senior enlisted watch supervisor, the loudest voice on the floor, the one who ran the room with sharp commands and a reputation for not tolerating mistakes, a man who believed discipline was best applied publicly and immediately, and he saw in her presence not quiet authority but a breach of order, a civilian analyst who had wandered somewhere she didn't belong, and the irritation rose in him fast because nothing offended Ramirez more than someone disrupting the structure he maintained. So he called out across the room without leaving his station, "Ma'am, this is a restricted watch floor. You need to check in at the desk," his voice carrying easily over the hum of equipment. But she didn't respond, didn't even turn her head, just kept studying the tablet and the wall of data like she hadn't heard him at all. And a few of the younger sailors glanced up with the uncomfortable half-smiles of people sensing tension but not wanting to be part of it. And Ramirez's jaw tightened because being ignored in his own watch floor felt like a direct challenge to his authority. So he stood, boots striking the raised metal decking as he walked toward her with deliberate impatience, the kind of walk that usually made junior sailors snap straight in their chairs. And when he got close enough to see her profile, he noticed how calm she was, how unhurried, how completely unbothered by his approach, and it irritated him even more. "I gave you an order," he said, louder now, close enough that everyone could hear. "This area is for cleared personnel only." And still she didn't react, her finger tracing something on the tablet screen as if she were following a thread only she could see. And that was the moment Ramirez crossed from correction into anger, because in his mind she had just disrespected him in front of his people, and without thinking about optics or restraint or the fact that he had no idea who she was, he reached out, grabbed her by the arm, spun her around, and pressed her back against the cold concrete wall beside the server cage with a solid thud that echoed louder than he expected in the suddenly silent room, and every key tap in the facility stopped at once, the entire watch floor frozen mid-motion, staring at the scene unfolding in front of them as Ramirez leaned in, voice low and sharp. "You do not ignore me on my floor. Identify yourself and your authorization right now." And the woman finally looked at him, her eyes lifting slowly from the tablet to meet his, gray and steady and completely devoid of fear, anger, or surprise, and that expression, calm, analytical, almost curious, hit him in a way he didn't understand because it didn't match the situation at all. She wasn't intimidated, wasn't flustered, wasn't defensive. She looked at him the way a technician looks at a malfunctioning piece of equipment, and in the back of the room, near the secure entrance, a master chief who had just stepped onto the watch floor stopped in his tracks as recognition washed over his face like a wave of ice water, because he had seen that exact look once before in a classified briefing room years ago, and he knew, with a sick certainty settling into his stomach, that Ramirez had just made a mistake of catastrophic proportions. But he didn't speak yet. didn't interrupt, because the moment was still unfolding and the weight of it hadn't fully landed, and Ramirez, mistaking her silence for defiance, tightened his grip slightly, as if physical control could restore the authority he felt slipping. The entire room watching, junior sailors staring wide-eyed, no one daring to intervene. The hum of servers the only sound in the vacuum of tension, and she didn't resist, didn't push back, didn't even brace. She simply held his gaze with that same unnerving stillness, tablet still in her hand, as if she were waiting for something else to happen, something none of them could yet see coming. And in that frozen second, with rain pounding the windows and dozens of sailors holding their breath, the first tiny flicker appeared on the main data wall behind them. A subtle glitch in the live feed that no one noticed yet, because every eye in the room was fixed on the sight of their watch supervisor pinning an unidentified woman to a wall, unaware that the real crisis of the night was already beginning to wake up. Behind him, the first alarm didn't sound like a crisis. It was a soft electronic chirp from one of the side consoles, the kind of noise sailors hear 100 times a shift and clear with a routine keystroke. But then another chirp answered it from across the room, and another, until the watch floor filled with a rising scatter of alerts that pulled every pair of eyes away from the confrontation at the wall and back toward the glowing screens, where something far more dangerous than a personnel dispute was unfolding in real time. The live encrypted feed tied to the carrier group offshore began to stutter, packets duplicating, fragmenting, then reassembling into unreadable strings as warning banners rolled across the monitors. Data integrity error, channel compromised, and the room snapped from frozen silence into controlled chaos as sailors dove back into their seats, fingers flying over keyboards, voices calling out status reports that overlapped into noise, while Sergeant Ramirez instinctively released the woman and turned toward the tactical wall, authority snapping back into his posture as he barked. Isolate the channel. Reroute through backup encryption. Now. But the systems didn't respond the way they were trained to, commands lagging, consoles flickering as if the facility itself were hesitating, confused about what it was seeing. The corrupted data stream spread across multiple feeds like ink and water, bleeding from one monitored line into another, and a cold realization passed through the room that this wasn't a simple glitch or equipment hiccup, but the exact nightmare scenario they drilled for in theory and hoped never to see in practice. A live cyber intrusion piggybacking onto an operational fleet network, happening fast enough that their procedural checklists suddenly felt slow and inadequate, and Ramirez's voice grew louder as tension climbed, issuing orders that sounded increasingly like questions because nothing he told them to do was having any effect, the system menus locking them out, security permissions failing to authenticate, one console after another turning into useless panes of warning text. And in the middle of this rising panic, the woman he had just pinned to the wall didn't argue, didn't scold, didn't even step away in anger. She simply walked, calm and unhurried, to a dark maintenance terminal along the side of the room that no one had used all shift, as if she had known exactly where it would be before she ever entered the watch floor. She knelt slightly, pulled a short-coiled cable from a pocket in her utilities, and connected her tablet to a shielded port beneath the console with smooth, practiced efficiency, while the rest of the room spiraled into louder confusion. And for a few seconds nobody noticed what she was doing because all attention was on the tactical wall where the corrupted feed had now triggered secondary alerts tied to fleet authentication, the worst possible cascade, until one of the younger sailors looked over and froze, staring at the tablet screen where lines of dense, raw code were flowing faster than he could read, her fingers moving across the glass not like someone typing, but like someone conducting, swiping and tapping in a precise rhythm that looked less like troubleshooting and more like conversation. And then something impossible began happening on the main display. The corrupted data stream stopped spreading and started shrinking, collapsing inward as if an invisible hand were gathering it up thread by thread, the warning banners blinking out one by one, replaced by clean signal lines that rebuilt themselves in real time, and the alarms that had filled the room with noise cut off mid-tone, leaving a sudden, heavy quiet broken only by the steady hum of servers returning to normal load. Ramirez noticed the silence first and turned, confusion replacing urgency as he followed everyone else's gaze to the woman at the maintenance terminal, watching as The final fragments of digital corruption vanished from the tactical wall, and the live carrier feed snapped back into perfect clarity. Encryption stable, authentication restored, system permissions unlocking as if nothing had ever happened. And the realization hit him in a slow, nauseating wave that she had just done in under 2 minutes what his entire trained watch team had failed to even begin fixing. She calmly unplugged the cable, coiled it, and slipped it back into her pocket, glancing once at the restored displays as if confirming a calculation she had already solved in her head. Wow. Every sailor in the room stared at her with a mix of awe and dawning dread, because the question none of them could avoid anymore was no longer who she was, but how someone they had mistaken for a lost civilian analyst had just demonstrated a level of mastery over their systems that bordered on unreal. And Sergeant Ramirez, who minutes ago had physically asserted control over her in front of everyone, now stood silent and very still, watching the only person in the room who had never once raised her voice bring the entire crisis to heel without a single command. The blast door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and the commanding officer of the installation stepped onto the watch floor flanked by 2 Marine MPs, his expression tight and unreadable as his eyes moved past Sergeant Ramirez without pause and fixed instead on the quiet woman standing beside the maintenance terminal. He walked straight to her, stopped 3 paces away, and rendered a crisp, textbook salute that snapped through the room like a rifle shot. "Admiral Whitaker," he said evenly, "we weren't informed you would be conducting this inspection in person." The word Admiral seemed to suck the air out of the space. Dozens of sailors stared, their minds struggling to reconcile the rank with the woman in plain utilities, the same woman Ramirez had slammed into a wall minutes earlier. She returned the salute with a small nod, calm as ever, then turned her gray eyes toward Ramirez. Not angry, not triumphant, just observant. "Your team knows how to operate the system," she said quietly. "They were never taught how to understand it. That's the vulnerability." It landed heavier than any shouted reprimand could have. The commanding officer then faced Ramirez. "Sergeant, you are relieved pending investigation." The Marine stepped forward gently but firmly, and Ramirez went without a word, his authority already gone, replaced by the crushing weight of realization. Admiral Whitaker didn't watch him leave. She simply picked up her tablet and turned back to the data wall, as if the entire incident had been nothing more than a minor system error, identified, corrected, and already forgotten.